said, my name is Stella, and I'm taking the manual testing class. And the manual testing class is basically for beginners, people who don't understand testing at all. So I'm going to be starting from the very basics of testing. If you understand this class, if you know manual testing, you'll be able to understand the desktop testing that we did yesterday, not the desktop, the other one that we did yesterday, the mobile app testing, and then the automation testing. So the fundamentals of testing basically starts here, which is the manual testing. Some people start with the automation if they can, but majority of the people start with manual. I started as a manual tester years back. So today we're going to be talking about the fundamentals of testing, the skills you need to become required to become a software tester. I would also look at the software testing lifecycle, and I actually put a little bit of definition for the web application testing and desktop application testing, because I'll be talking about, when I'm talking about web application, you will understand what I mean, and when I talk about desktop application, you will also understand what I mean. Those might be generic, but just throughout the course, I'll be making references to things like if you are doing a web application testing or if you are doing a desktop application testing, and I just wanted you to understand that. So when we say manual testing, what do we mean by manual testing? So manual testing, I would say, is a process where you compare an expected behavior of an application, a desktop application, a web application, with the actual behavior of the application. So when the developers build an application, they refer to a specification or a requirement. The same requirements written by the BA, they will refer to that and they will build an application. Now, as far as the developers are concerned, they feel they've built the application according to the specification. Your role, my role as a tester, is to test that the application works according to specification. There are various types of specification. I will go into that in a minute. But if I'm talking about specification here, let me just talk generally about specifications. So when I say specification, I mean the functional specification of that, functional documents, functional specification of that application. For example, the application, the television, if you say, for example, television, if I press this button, the button must be able to switch on the television. The television should have colored, the television should be black, or the television should be white. I should be able to see the screen, and when I press the buttons, I should be able to press the channel. So we have various specifications depending on the application we are building. Now let me bring it back to a desktop application. Let's say my desktop application, which is my Word document. If I click on the file, I need to be able to see some drop downs. If I click on the exit button, I need to be able to exit. So your requirements will say, if you click on Word on the font drop down list should be specified, and you should be able to choose what font and highlight your document. So your requirement document would actually specify exactly what the functions of your application is. So if you want your application to be bright, your requirement document, your requirement specification or your requirement document will specify that. Now, we testers, we test according to your requirements. Skills you need to become a software tester. You need to have communication skills, good communication skills, in the sense that you have to be able to communicate with everybody in your team. So if you are testing, for example, and you're looking at your requirements, you've got your requirement from your BA, and you don't understand anything of that requirement, you need to highlight it. Oh, what does this mean? What does that mean? From the beginning, you need to be able to communicate with everybody within your team. So communication is very vital. Analytic skills. As a good software, you have to have sharp analytic skills. What do I mean by that? It means you have to understand how to break systems into smaller complexes. So, for example, if they say, oh, if you look at your requirement, for example, you have to be thinking, because you're a tester, you'll be thinking, what would I do with this requirement? A requirement will come in a large bulk. Some people will number it 1, 2, 3, which is helping you. Maybe these days they do. They even put it in tabular form. Some people don't. They'll just give you a whole document, 50-page document. Go and sort it out. So it means you have to figure out what you can test within that document and what you cannot test. So I'll give you an example. If you get a requirement document, all you are looking for is your actions. What actions can I perform as a tester? Your actions are the actions of the system, of the application, is more or less your functional. Those are your requirements. So you have to be looking for what you can test within that. So you have to have a good eye for detail. You have to be able to think outside the box. You have to have good communication skills. Good communication skills, you have to be able to communicate verbally or written. So when I say good communication skills, speak to the developers. The developers will develop an application, and of course, if it's a defect, when most cases when you tell them it's a defect, they will say to you, oh, it's working on my machine. I still get that at my working place. But I don't just say to them, oh, it's not working and it's not working. You have to have a rapport. Developers are not testers' friends. Testers are either developers' friends too, but you are not there to make friends with anybody. You're just there to make sure you get along and you are able to do the job. So you have to have a good communication skills, time management, and organization skills as well. You've been given 2 weeks to test a document or to test an application, and you have to adhere to those 2 weeks. Within those 2 weeks, you have to break down your task into minimal as minimal as possible, and you assign times to those as well, to say, okay, I know I'll be testing this functionality, I can test it for 1 week. I have to do my test preparation, which is looking at my requirements, making sure I gather my test scenarios. I'll come to that in a minute. All those, you have to have your time management and organizational skills. You have to be able to organize your day. Because remember, if they say 2 weeks deadline, you don't want to be in a project, for example. The project manager is counting on the tester to deliver a testing. Within those 2 weeks, you are still trying to gather your test scenarios, let alone test cases, let alone testing. You have to be able to know the process of what you need to do as a test analyst. And this is why this course is vital. Then you have to have a great attitude. Great attitude in the sense that you have to have an attitude as a tester. Your attitude is to break the system. And when I say break the system, your attitude is to look for defects. So I have a feeling and I believe if they tell me this application should work, obviously at work they will be like, everybody will be like, oh, this application should work. I go with the mindset that no, it's not going to work. And the more I find defects, the better I feel. Your job as a test analyst is to find defects. And the only reason why you... Can everyone mute their mics, please? Thank you. So, as I was saying, your role as a test analyst is to find defects. If you go to a job and you don't find defects, you will not be happy. So your role is to find defects. In fact, if you don't find defects, it means the application is perfect. Then they don't need you anymore. But nobody wants that. So you have to try as much as possible. Like I said, if you have a great attitude, you have the willingness to learn and give suggestions and break the software. When I say break, physically look for defects. There is always defects, even if it's the look and feel of the application. So apart from the functionalities, the look and feel, this website doesn't feel right. This application, why is it shaking? Or why is it wobbling? I can't click on something. I want to click on this thing and I can't click on it. Or I can't even log on to the internet. It's a defect. You don't call your developer to say, oh, come and quickly have a look at this. It's a defect. No, you log it, then you have a conversation later. At least let it be on record that you are finding defects. Because I tell you, the more defects you find, you go home happy. So you have to have a passion for testing. I have a passion for testing. And everybody that knows me knows that I can't do any other thing than testing. And that's why I want to learn manual testing, automation testing, everything I can learn about testing because that's my passion. So you have to have a passion. And the reason I said that is testing can be very boring sometimes. And when I say boring, you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. So manual testing can be boring because you are physically looking at a system and you are recording the manual details. Click on File. Expected results. The drop-down menu should open. Actual results. Drop-down menu opens. Click on Home, the Home tab. What did you get from that? Things like that. So you write down. Sometimes it's the same is repetitive and it becomes boring. So you have to have a passion for it. It's not just the money, but the passion as well. And the only reason why they pay testers good money if you're a contractor is because they would rather pay you 300, 400 a day than pay, say for example, a bank application. You have only £300 in your account and you've requested for £300 and the cash machine has given you £3,000. Now that £3,000 has come out maybe from somebody else's account and that person wants to withdraw his money. He can't withdraw because you've overdrawn, you've taken more than you should. Now that person will be seeking for compensation, and it's a lot of compensation. So once they are doing that, instead of them to compensate that person, they will rather pay a test analyst a good sum of money so that the tester can test it very well. And when we test, we don't test, there's a word I'm looking for, exhaustively, something like that. As in, it means we do not test completely. There is still always defect, no matter how we test. We can't. There's no application free of defect. But with a tester, we minimize the defects. We make the defects minimal, and that's why people employ testers. So what do we need? What are the basic skills of a test analyst? For you to become a test analyst, the basic skills, technical skills, the skills I mentioned earlier, communication skills, analytic skills are all non-technical skills. But for your technical skills, you have to have a big background of SQL. We might touch SQL maybe in another class, but you need a bit of SQL. SQL you only need if you are querying a database. And then if you are doing database testing. Then you also need knowledge of the application and hands-on experience of a test management tool. And the test management tool we are going to use is the Azure DevOps for this. The test management tool is actually an important aspect of software testing. This is where we document all our test cases. We document our test plan. We put all our test cases in. We can even run our test cases, and we have a record of that. Or sometimes you take a screenshot, because in most cases, when you do a test in an environment, let's say the developer has developed according to the requirements. You, the test analyst, they've given you a test. They've given you the requirement also. You've done your testing, maybe in a different environment, a UAT environment. Or no, let me suggest another environment apart from UAT. Let's say you are doing system testing, and I'll break all those down in a minute. And then after doing your system testing, you found all the defects that you could find. But one thing you forgot to take is your test evidence, your screenshots. Now they went to UAT. UAT people in most organizations, the people who do the UAT testing are actually the business users. Now you have done your testing. As far as you are concerned, you've raised all your defects. You didn't even raise defects. As far as you are concerned, it passed. And it's true, you didn't even see those defects. So by the time they get to UAT, loads of defects start springing up. And they will be like, the first thing they will ask was this tested? And who do they face? The tester. And when they face the tester, they come to you, did you test this? Did you test that? You keep saying yes, yes. Test management says yes, test run. But you don't have an evidence. You did not capture your screenshot. Your screenshot is very vital. I know of a tester in the past where we used to work. He never captured any screenshot, and he said he tested. They sacked him. Some organizations don't frown at it. Some organizations do. But I make it my I make it my it's the way I work. I take a screenshot just to prove I've tested this. And when I tested this, this was my expected result. Now, because it's a different environment, remember, like I said, you are testing in a system, you're doing your system testing in an environment, your UAT environment is different. The fact that it's a different environment, the applications might not behave the same way. But in most cases, the business users don't understand this. So part of the things you'll be doing is to be taking a screenshot. Now, you also need a knowledge of your defects, defect life cycle. When you raise a defect, how do you handle do you just raise a defect? Or do you classify, what do you classify as a defect? And of course, your defect is the difference between the expected and the actual results. So your expected result, you are expecting something to perform in a certain way as documented in the requirements. And by the time you test it, it's made in a different way. And that's a defect, because that's not your expected result. So as I was saying, can you mute your mic, please? So as I was saying, the knowledge of your defect life cycle is very, very important. And also your defect tracking tool. In most organizations, the test management tool is the same as the defect management tool. Some people use Jira, some people use different HP ALM, some people use Azure DevOps or TFS, and we're going to use Azure DevOps. If you have any questions, type in the keypad. At the end of the lesson, I would answer all the questions. I will endeavor to go through all the questions and answer them. Now, as a tester, you know your role is to test an application. And as long as there's an application, there would always be testers. Some organizations don't know the importance of a test analyst. They only call on a test analyst when they go live and there's an issue. Then they remember, oh, I've got it. Oh, we now need a tester. So even when you're working in your organizations, they don't take the tester serious, not as serious as a BA. The BA will write the requirements. The tester is the one who will do the last job, testing, depending on whether you're doing whatever methodology that you're using. But you as a tester, you feel confident if you can prove the application is not even worth it. Not that they have to go and throw the application away. Of course, when you raise the defects, bugs, they would fix. So it means the more defects you raise, the more fixing they do, the better the quality of your application. The application can stand any other application out there. So when we talk about testing, we will talk about the software testing life cycle. What do I mean by that? So software testing life cycle is actually the steps, the phases of development. So when we are actually, the testing processes which a testing application goes through. So within testing, we have the software testing life cycle, and we have the software testing development. We have the software development life cycle. But the software testing life cycle is the phases which your testing goes through. We have the requirement phase. Is the first one. Within the requirement phase, the BA produces a requirement document. And your requirement document, depending on what you are testing, whether you are doing a system test, within the system test, you can have the SRS, which is the specification requirement document, or they call it functional requirement document, or functional requirement specification. Is the same thing. But some organizations use it interchangeably. It means it's a list documenting the functional requirement, functionality of an application. Say, for example, my pen. the functionality of my pen is that my pen should be able to write. And when I write, I can see what is written in my pen. The functionality, main functionality of my mobile phone would be I should be able to make some calls and I should be able to receive some calls at the same time. Those will be the main functionality. Before I start looking at the picture quality, before I can start looking whether it contains app, the most important thing would be, oh, I can receive some calls, they can hear me, I can be heard. And so when you are right, when they write the requirements, they give it, priorities. And the priority is either high, medium, low, or critical, depending on how the application works. So when you say critical, for example, or high, it must, the application must have that functionality. It means when you are testing, it must work. But when they give it a critical priority like low, for example, it means they can do without it. So if I'm using my mobile phone, I need to be able to receive some calls, and I need to be able to speak and I'm heard. That will be part of my high priority or critical priorities. Now, so when you get your requirement document, that's the phase of testing. Is one of the software testing lifecycle phase, your requirement phase. Now, what do you do with the requirements? At the requirement phase, there are things that we do. Requirement phase is where you brainstorm. You have a walkthrough with the BA. So when you get your requirements and you are reading it, you're not even writing anything. You are reading through the requirements, you do your brainstorm, you ask questions, you create a list. If you have any doubts, you clarify those doubts. And then you start jotting down your points. You start jotting down your points. Okay. You liaise with the BA to try and understand what it means by this. The application must be able to, the application must be black. The system should be able to turn on, the television should be able to come on when I press this button. And whether she says this button, you'll be like, sorry, what button is that? You want to know what button she's talking about because there are so many buttons. Is it the blue button or the red button? So when you have a walkthrough with the BA, you are able to discuss the requirements and you are able to understand. Within that, you now start creating your test scenarios. Your test scenarios are what you want to test. Testable. What are your testability? What can you test within this application? Remember, you are a tester. So all you are reading within that document is what you can test. And that's your test scenario. How you want to now test it are your test cases. So anybody can write a test case. Now, within that requirement phase, you understand the application. You understand the application design document as well. So your requirement document might come with a design document as well. And that makes you understand your requirement document very well. So within that phase, that's the requirement phase, you are dealing mainly with the requirements. And during this phase, you analyze your requirements. You study the requirements. You brainstorm the requirements with other members of your team. Depending on how large the organization is, you might have 10 testers doing the same thing, testing the same project, however, different functionalities. But at the initial stage, everybody has to brainstorm, and they call it a peer review. You do a peer review with your peers. But at the requirement stage, all you do is speak to your BA. So let him give you a walkthrough. Or you don't understand the system. You don't even know how the system works. The BA is there to take you through the system. Or if they say the system should be able to do this or do that, you sit in front of the desktop and you click. In some cases, you don't even have a requirement and you have to test as a test analyst. That means if you don't have a requirement, you have a test environment. Your test environment might just be your Word document, for example, is installed on your laptop. So what do? You explore the application. You click on this button. Where does it lead to? If I click on file, what do I see? If I click on the layout, how is the application supposed to work? By playing with the application, you'll be able to jot down, when I click on file, this will open. When I click on submit, does it say yes, your application has been submitted, or I'm just met with or it takes me to navigate to a different screen? Things like that. By the time you explore, you will come up with expected results. Because not all organizations have functional requirements, business requirements, or whatever. Most companies don't have it. And if they don't have it, you still have to test. They expect you to test. And this is where your analytical skills come in. This is where you have to be able to think. Put your daily, everything you do on a daily basis. If you're a computer, I wouldn't want to say a computer genius, but if you use a computer, you should be able to know how these things function. So, and that's the requirement phase. At the planning phase, this is the other step within the test process. This is the first step actually within the test process, because the requirements you are not even testing. Now, within the planning phase, we start planning for the activities of testing. What activities are we doing within this testing? What are the test objectives? How do we meet the test objectives? How many resources do we have? Within this phase, we also start talking about our deliverables. So, testing is not just turn up and look at the system. Testing is a process. You as a test analyst would understand that testing is a process because there are lots of activities involved in testing. However, the company you're working for, the business users, they don't understand this. They'll just say to you, oh, I need to test this, that. It doesn't work that way. You as a tester need to, if they say, oh, I need to test this, that. Okay, fine. They're giving you a document. You need to plan for it. You need to be able to say, oh, it will take me 2 weeks to test. You need to be able to say, oh, I would take 10, I would have to, let's see, I've seen 10 test scenarios here, and I now have 100 test cases for that. And you have to be able to plan for it. So what I'm trying to say is that when you're measuring testing, when you're test planning, testing needs to be measured. You need to be able to provide a visibility of testing. How long? Define the scope of testing. How long would my testing take? How long would it take me to test this? Do a risk analysis if you have to, and plan. Perform test estimation. There's a rule of thumb when you estimate, and I'll come to that later. But these things I'm telling you about planning, in most organizations, the planning and the test estimation is done by the test lead. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but it's good for you to understand that you have to go through planning. You have to plan. You don't just turn up and test. It's like you want to travel abroad. You have to plan. How much would it cost me to get my flight? If it's 24 hours flight, you have to plan. If you want to get there at 9 o'clock, you have to plan. It's the same thing. You have to plan when you get on the bus, when you take the train. If they say an interview is at 10 o'clock, you have to prepare and you have to get the bus. So it's the same thing with testing. If they say you must test this within 2 weeks, you have to plan. What activities are involved? What tasks are involved? And you break this down and plan so that you are within the deadlines. You want to meet test deadlines and you want to raise defect within those deadlines. At the same time, they are going to retest, you are going to fix the defect and you are going to retest the defects. I think I will send, after this class, I might send a list of, or I'll make available a list of terminologies that we use in testing, because there are some language that you have to use within testing. So also you have to determine the overall testing strategy. What strategy am I using? When I say strategy, I'm talking about what test am I doing? Am I doing a user acceptance testing? Am I doing an integration testing? Am I doing a system testing? And we'll get to that shortly. So another phase is also the analysis phase. When within the software testing life cycle, we are talking about when you talk about the analysis phase, we are talking about what to be tested. We have to basically identify the test conditions. And the test conditions are within the requirement document. And also the test basis. So when I say test conditions, what do I mean? My test conditions can be retraced back to my requirements. We have to be able to understand what we mean by test conditions. And the test condition is usually in the requirements. So say for example, you go given the system is shaky, for example. You want to test an application. So what condition is it? What condition is it? What condition? The condition of the application doesn't mean the condition is okay. So, but when we're talking about condition, we are saying given these circumstances, I want to be able to do this despite the fact that this condition is there. Given these circumstances, say for example, I'm testing an e-commerce. I'm testing a web-based application. And I have a test condition saying the user should be able to make payments. Or you can detail it by saying user should be able to make payments through debit card. That's the condition I've given. That's not my end result, but it's the condition I've given for that test. For example, the diagram I've got here, the user should be able to sign in. Sign into their account. Now, I'm not telling you how to sign in, but I've given you that condition. And you understand that it is mostly important that we detail the condition as it helps us understand what we really need to test and the test coverage and the reason for testing. Sorry, I said test coverage, and when I say test coverage, I mean the amount of testing that we're doing. Say, for example, they've given me a requirement. I have my requirement, and my requirement says a user should be able to make a payment on a website, web-based application. Within that, what am I looking for? I'm looking for the test basis. I'm looking for the reasons why I should test. I'm looking for my coverage. Different coverages. So what I'm trying to say is that you would have not one particular test for that. So if I'm able to log into the system, what are the activities I would perform? I need to have maybe a username. I need to have maybe a password. And I need to be able to sign in. Click on the sign in button. Those are the different activities I'll perform to be able to get to where I can log in. The logging in is my condition. I want to log in, but I need to do all these activities. So basically, you are tracing those activities to your requirements. So we have one requirement and we have several activities to perform within that. And when I say activities and how to now do the activities are the test cases. I hope I haven't confused anyone. I can explain it all over again, if need be. So the next phase I'm going to talk about after the analysis phase. Oh, I've said that. We have the design phase. The design phase is how to test. Within this phase, we are breaking down the conditions into multiple sub-conditions, like I've mentioned earlier. Within this phase, we will identify the test data. Talking about the phases of testing, and I think I've mentioned a bit of this as well. So within that phase, within the design phase, we are talking about the test data, how to set up your test environment. Now, your test environment, if we are testing this slide that you are looking at in front of you, this is your test environment. So when you see test environment, don't think it's one big grammar like that. No, it's not. This is your test environment. So if I come to you today and I say, can you guys test this application that you're looking at in front of you? This is your test environment. Now your test data, I think let me use another example. Now your test data, for example, would be, if I want to test an Excel spreadsheet, for example, and I want to test that I can populate, a database, for example. I want to test that I can populate that database. Let's say, I think there used to be an access or something like that before. So all I'll do is start creating, maybe the organization, maybe they deal with food, they sell food. All I'll do is start putting things like, start creating things like smoked salads, smoked fish, smoked turkey as an item. Populate the database, put them in the database. In most cases, we, the test analysts, don't create the test data. The test data is usually created by the engineers. It depends on the organization you're working in. I've worked on the till before, whereby I have to test a NIPOS, a point of sale, which is a till. And the till doesn't just work on its own. I had to start making a lot of sales. So I came in the morning, I had to make a lot of sales. Remember, it's a test environment, and I had a test lab to myself. So I started typing on the keypad, putting in some sales, some rice plus dodo plus all sorts. Start making all sorts of sales, all their products on sale. By the end of the day, because with the sales I've made, I want to be able to say, generate my test. And my test will say, for example, how many sales did I make today? How much was the capital generated? How many refunds did I make? If I didn't put those sales through the till, I wouldn't be able to determine how many refunds I've made, or how many sales did I make at the end of the day, or how much pounds did I generate. So for you to be able to test, you have to be able to create a lot of data to meet all the conditions of your testing. Enough data so you can't start testing with the same data. Say, for example, the till example that I've done, and I want to create a test data. I can't just say rice and beans for £5. That's not enough data. I need to put a lot of data, maybe for £100. But remember, you have to break the system. So I want to be able to see, if I make a sale of 10,000 on the till, will the till crash? Is that the limit? Because the requirement says you can't sell more than, make a total sale in a day more than £10, for example, and I make a total sale of £100 on my till, and the till accepts that, I'm able to go through the till. That's the defect, because the requirement says £10 is the maximum sale. So that's an example of how you create your test data. But in most cases, you don't have to create the test data. The engineer creates it. And within this phase, also, you do your requirements traceability matrix within the design phase. What do I mean? Within the design phase, you have created your test plan. You have created your test cases. Now you map your test cases to your scenarios, and the scenarios back to your requirements. So you have a requirement, and the requirement has been defined as high priority. And the requirement says, I have to be able to get to London. How you get to London is what you, the test analyst, will determine. And those will make up of your test cases, because your test cases are specific instruction on how to get to where you want to go. Click on the icon, on the Internet Explorer icon. Expected result. Internet Explorer should open. Actual result is when you perform it. But your test cases is, first test case, I want to be able to log on to this website, to Amazon website. That's your test scenario. That's your scenario, your high level scenario. And your test cases will be click steps to actually do that. The steps to actually do what you want to do are the test cases. Click their specific instructions. Click on the Internet Explorer icon, the Internet Explorer should be displayed. Click on or go to this URL, www. Put this URL in your browser and click Go. Amazon should be displayed. On Amazon, click on the login button or click on the register button. Registration page should be displayed. That's your expected result. Actual result is when you now do it. And those are your test cases. So you have to be able to map your requirements, your specific requirement, to your test scenario, to your test cases. And that's what's called traceability matrix. Why do we do traceability matrix? We do traceability matrix so that we're able to understand that, oh, for these requirements, we have so amount of test cases. So that when they are saying, have you tested this, you can trace your test back to your requirement. And in most cases, you do the traceability matrix, you can do it on an Excel spreadsheet, which I can show you an example later, or you do it in these days, they do the traceability matrix, you can do it in your test management tool, Azure DevOps. Then at the implementation stage, this is where we now prioritize our test cases. We prioritize them according to the priority that has been given in the requirements. Now, there are two things I want to mention. We talk about priority and severity. A priority of a test case or a priority is determined by the BA. So, in the beginning, when they give you a requirement, it comes with a high level priority. That priority, once they say is high or critical, you can't bring it down to low. The system must be able to, must have. The system could have, but once they say must have, it means it's priority 1. Or is it priority 4? So it means it must have is high. That means it's priority 4. So once they say is high, sorry, I keep saying 4, it's not 4, it's 1. If they say is high, which is 1, it means you should be able, that system must do that thing. Now, you cannot change that priority. Even when you create your test cases, it still covers the same, for that requirement, it still covers, it still assumes the same priority. Now, when you raise your defects, when you raise a defect against that same, maybe the system, you must be able to log on. It says high priority. Say, for example, I want to test a website and I cannot even log on to my URL. I can't log on. I can't click. I click on my Internet Explorer. My Internet Explorer is not opening. In fact, that's a showstopper because I can't test now when I can't even log on to the Internet. So that, for example, is priority. They would have given it priority high, which is 1. When you raise a defect against it, for me, that's even critical, higher than 1. But of course, let's say, for example, let's say for argument's sake, you raise a defect. And when you raise the defect, you as a test analyst will determine the severity of that defect. Now, priority is the impact on that functionality, business impact. Meanwhile, severity is the impact of that defect on the application you are testing. So it means sometimes you can have a high priority 1 with the defect low. The tester sets the severity whilst the BA sets the priority. And once the priority starts, they've given the requirement a priority, your test cases assumes the same priority until you get to the defect. Now when you get to the defects, when you raise the defect, that's when you now say severity. You, the tester, will determine the severity. And the severity of a defect is the impact of that defect on an application. Say, for example, when you want to log on to the Internet Explorer and you click on it, you can't, the Internet Explorer is not opening. That's severity 1. It means it needs to be fixed like yesterday, ASAP. So at the implementation stage, this is when we now start finalizing everything about our test cases. We look at our test cases. Sometimes your test cases are not even right because you've said click on the icon. The icon should open. Sometimes the test cases are not exact. When you are testing, that's when you now determine, oh, so some people make the test cases, it's the same thing as test scripts. So when we say test cases, we mean the same thing. It's the same thing as test scripts. When we say test suites, it's like we're keeping a whole lot. This is where we keep a whole lot of test cases. We keep them in the test suites and we label them. So you have test cases for regression testing, or you have test cases, so I'll come to that in a minute, or we have test cases that we've executed last year, or we've determined that this is where we found most of our defect. This is the application. So when we have an application, for example, we have the chair functionality. No, let me use the car. We have the wheel functionality, the steering wheel functionality. We have the seat functionality. These are all we are testing. We have the roof cover functionality. Now we've created test cases for the roof cover, for the seats, and for the steering wheel. We keep all that in a suitcase, in a folder, and that's what we call test suites. Test suites, they call it. So there's no difference between that. Don't get confused with test suites. People say test suites is just a storage for lots of test cases, different test cases, and you have to organize them so that when you now think, oh, I've tested that functionality before. What are the test cases? You're not going to scout through your system to look for test cases you rate for the wheel, for the steering wheel, for example. You've got all those test cases labeled steering wheel, so you can just go there and run them again. Now, after the implementation stage, what do? We do the execution phase. This is the bit that the business likes. They turn up, they execute the testing. So when you are executing tests, you are now doing the testing itself. You don't remember all the preparation. You've done all the preparation just for this. You are testing. Then that's when you physically look at the application. Click on this. Then you click on it on because you've written your test cases. Now you are following your test cases. Click on the Internet Explorer icon. You click on it. Click on the password field. You click on it. Input your password. Expected result. I should be able to log in. Actual result. I cannot log in. That's the defect. If you put, of course, they would have given you the condition for the password. Maybe you have to use your email address, and you've obeyed those conditions. You've obeyed, you put your email address, and then you put your password, and it's not accepting that password. You can't log in. So this is an example. I've got a template here. It's an example of a test case. So you have So you have your step 1, step 2, navigate to the login page. I don't know whether you can see this properly, and then test data. Your test data is your user, exactly, is your username and your password. And your expected result, you are expected to log in. And your actual result, you can't log in. And of course, that's failed. Now, when you are actually doing your test execution, you are actually testing now. You as a test analyst, what you are looking out for is what failed, what's different, what is the difference between your actual results and the expected results. The users will expect it to be the same, but you, the test analyst, remember you've got your analytical skills, you've got your communication skills, you've got your eyes for details, you can even think outside the box. If you are looking at this application that I've put in front of you now, this test case, and this is how the test case, this is how the test environment is displayed. You haven't written a test case for it, but you can't see it properly. The fact that the look and feel, I can't see this properly, or can you? So the fact that you can't see this properly, you raise it as a defect because you can't see this properly. Because the look and feel. So apart from the test cases that you've documented from your requirement document, you can raise defects that are not in the test cases. Say, for example, you've been able to get 100 test cases from your requirements. The look and feel is not part of the test case. So as a test analyst, they'll expect you to raise some defects, even if you don't have test cases for them. So you have not prepared, you haven't said, oh, you'll be testing the look and feel. But if you feel the fonts are not right, maybe I've used a different font, it's a defect. Everything on this page is not the same color, for example. Well, the color doesn't matter because it's been used for highlight. Well, everything, I can't see this clearly. So the application is not useful if I can't see it. So it's a defect. But you haven't said in your requirement, I must be able to see the application properly or something like that. You haven't said that. But then you raise a defect for that. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say the software testing lifecycle concentrates more on what you need to do, your exit criteria for every step. So what I mean by that is, within the testing phase, for example, execution phase, all you are looking for is the number of defects you raised, your status reports, and your status reports would contain things like number of test cases that you executed, number passed, number failed, number blocked. Sometimes number blocked is blocked maybe because the functionality is not being developed yet, so you cannot test it. But it's your duty as a test analyst to report the status at the end of the day to your test lead. Remember, we've created a test. We've created test cases, maybe 100 test cases, and they've given us 2 weeks to test. And there are 2 resources. So if you are doing 7 a day, each person is doing 7 a day. It means 14 that we are doing in 1 day, and we have 100. 5 days might not be enough to test the 100 without even calculating from the top of my head. So if you can test more than the 7 in a day, yes, you've documented it, you've done everything you need to document. At least the test lead knows that, oh, we've got so and so amount of test left. This is the amount we can do we've done today. We've got this duration of time to test the rest. So you as a test analyst, when you are testing, those are the kind of things that you report on. The number of test cases, the defects raised, or the severity of those defects. Remember, you assign severity. And when you are raising your defects, you have to be able to write a lot of things in it. So say, for example, I should be able to log on. When I put in my username and my password and I click on the login button, I should be able to I should be logged on. But you've done everything. You put in your username, you put in your password, and you cannot log on. That is a defect. Now, your defect will be, I cannot log on when I click on the login button. So basically, your defect is the exact thing that happened. Not the story, it's exact thing. So I should log on, click on the log on button. So all you'll be doing is step to reproduce. So you detail your steps from the beginning, because the developer might not understand how you got to the page in the first place, or how you raise the defect. So all you say is, I cannot log on when I click on the login button, could not log on. Now you detail your steps. Steps to reproduce. Log into the Amazon website. Click on the username field. Input username. Click on the password field. Input password. Click on login. Expected result, I should be logged on. Actual result, or it shows it, maybe it shows a defect. It might just say, the system might just say, oh, you cannot log on, or I don't know when. If you can't log on, sometimes you get the system tells you something, password incorrect, or no, apart from password incorrect, I don't want it to be your fault. So you put the password in right, but you still cannot log in. Or maybe it just cannot log you on and it gives you an error message, or you just say error message displayed when login button clicked, and you document all your steps to reproduce, so that the developer or whoever is fixing the defect would replicate the defect. They would do exactly what you did, so that they can arrive at the same defect that you got. Right, so I want to go back to my documents. I was talking about my functional requirement document. Functional requirement document would be the document that the BA, it's a very high level document, and it documents the functional specification of the software under test. It will tell you everything, the functionalities of the application, what the application is supposed to do. In most cases, we do positive. So when we're testing, all we do is positive testing, but there are some times you need to do negative testing. Say, for example, they've given you a website to test, and they say the date format should be day, month, year, or something like that, DDMMYYY. And that's the format they've stipulated in the requirement. You can go in and put the month, year, the year, month, American format, something like that. The system shouldn't accept that, because in the functional requirement is documented that it should be that format, but it's accepted a different format. So what am I saying in essence? I'm saying that sometimes we do positive, most times we do positive testing, but in most cases you have to be able to think outside the box and do negative tests. You've got a field, for example, and the field says must contain only alpha as the alphabetical. Now you put numbers in there in that field. Let's see whether it accepts numbers. Password, they say sometimes must be 8 letters and 2 must be 8 letters and 2 numbers, and it must include a capital letter and then maybe a character or something. Try not to put the character and see whether it will accept it. If it accepts it, then it's a defect, because it shouldn't. It's been specified in the requirement document. So the requirement document is there for us to refer to. All our testing, when you're doing your functional testing, you're testing according to the requirement document. And like I said earlier, that depends on what you are actually testing. Now, I was going to talk about the business requirement as well. So when we are talking about a business requirement, for example, we are actually referring to the user acceptance testing. So at every before I say this, I was going to talk about the for you to understand what I was about to say, I was going to talk about the software development life cycle quickly. So at the software, when we develop any software, I'm not sure whether I've got this in my slide. You know what, I don't have it in my slide, so I'm not going to teach it today. Apologies for that. So as I was saying, I'll just explain the requirement document as I was explaining before. So you've got your requirement document, which is the functional requirement document, because remember right now we are doing, let's say we are doing system testing, and we've got our functional requirement, or we are doing system integration testing. And system testing would be testing a particular system, a standalone desktop application. Say for example, you are testing your Word document. It's a standalone application. It doesn't integrate, let's say it doesn't integrate with anything. Everything you need is on that application. So when we've got the functional requirement, that's specifically for a system testing. This functional requirement as well can be for system integration testing. What do I mean by system integration testing? It's an application that integrates with another application. Say for example, you have your Word document and it has a submit button on it, and you submit. it submits into an inbox. When it submits into an inbox, for example, that's system integration testing. We'll discuss the levels of testing and how many testings, different types of testing next time. Now, as I was saying about my requirements, if I've got my business requirements, from my business requirements, I'm trying to identify my test scenarios. I know I've spoken about test scenarios, but I want you to be able to go today understanding test scenarios and test cases, if nothing else, amongst all I've said. So like I said before, my test scenario will talk about high-level scenarios. What can I test within my requirements? What am I testing? So I've got my requirement. It says the system should be able to do, I should be able to log on. What am I testing? Test that I can log on is my high-level scenario. Or validate that I can log on. You can write it anyhow as long as it makes sense. It's simple English. Remember, the requirement document is written in English. Simple English, not to confuse anyone. Test that the application would open when that button is clicked. That's what you want to test. And that's simply what you want to test. But then your test cases will now tell you how to test it. Click on the login button. Click on the Internet Explorer. So when you first start, you take your requirement document from the BA. All you are thinking of is, what can I test? Testables. What can be tested in this document? And when you start documenting what you can test, those are your test scenarios. Your test case will detail exactly how you are going to test that. So as a test analyst, there are 5 steps to creating your test scenarios. You have to read your requirement document and understand it. For each requirement document, I'm just giving you these tips. For each requirement document, you have to be able to understand the user's actions and objectives, and ascertain possible scenarios. After reading your document, what you do is to analyze it. Break every step down. Verify what feature of the software will do this. And once you've listed all your test scenarios, all you're doing now is doing your traceability matrix. Like I said earlier, tracing your requirements to the scenarios and then the scenarios to the test cases. And the test cases will simply tell you, test your instructions, how to do the testing. Click on the Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer should be displayed. Log on, log in, possible or not possible, log in successful. And then what you now do again, when you've written all your scenarios, before you even start writing test cases, when you've written all your scenarios, you can have a walkthrough with the BA. So on a daily basis, depending on what stage of testing that you are, on a daily basis when you come in, it's best for me, I think it's best to start testing from the beginning if you're a beginner. And why I said that is this. So from the beginning, if you enter an organization, for example, and they have started testing, for a beginner, sometimes it's difficult. You'll be like, okay, where do I start? But if you get employed and they are just starting the project, yes, all the slideshows, all the meetings you have from the beginning, even project kickoff meeting, the test analyst would attend, because now they are talking about the application and you understand better. They are talking about the requirement, how to meet the requirement. Maybe the developer is talking about what to develop and how to meet the requirement, and you understand very well. Now, I think I'm on this one. So I've spoken about test cases. Yes, it is. So I've spoken about test cases and what they are, and I've spoken about the requirement traceability matrix, and I've spoken about your test coverage, and I've also spoken about your test data. Now, test strategy. Am I making sense so far? Can somebody just type in their keypads, please? I don't want to go too fast so that I don't want to bombard people with a lot of topics, so that I just want people to understand, because the fundamentals of testing is very, very important. And once you understand the fundamentals of testing, it's very easy. Testing is the easiest job you can do. Is the first job I think you can to get into the IT field. But of course, different opinions vary. Right. Okay. I'm happy I'm making sense. So right now I wanted to talk about, next week I'll talk about the bit that I skipped, which is the software development life cycle, and I'll go back to talk about the software testing life cycle and how they are interwoven. Now I'm talking about test strategy now. Now test strategy is a document. In most cases, you, the test analyst, would not write a test strategy. But of course, it's good for you to understand what a test strategy is. Test strategy is an overall, for me, test strategy is an overall, is a document that defines the strategy within that organization. You will not be writing a test strategy as a test analyst. The test strategy will document what type of testing they do for what type of project, depending on the number of projects that they have. But the test plan is a document that you as a test analyst might be writing. The test lead might write it, but it's good for you to know what a test plan is. The test plan just basically says what the plan is for your testing for this particular project. It will give you things like timelines. I've got 2 weeks to do timelines. What sort of testing are we doing within this project? Are we doing just system tests, whereby you are testing the system as a standalone application? Or are we doing system integration testing, whereby the system integrates with another application? Or are we testing the user UAT? Are we doing UAT, user acceptance testing, whereby, of course, in most cases, you test according to the business requirements. And in most cases, the business will be doing that testing. How long does it take to test? You have roles and responsibilities. The role of the BA. What is the BA doing? Is the BA gathering the requirement? What is the tester doing? Is the tester the one testing? What is the developer doing? Is it the one developing? Where would your test cases be? What stage would you prepare the test cases? You prepare the test cases at the planning stage. Where would you keep the test cases? What test management tool are you using? In this case, we are using the DevOps. What test case management tool are you using? How long will it take? What duration have we got to do this testing? What severity are we giving to all the defects? What's the defect management plan that we've got? What plan have we got for our defects? Defect severity, like I said, defect severity 1, for example. How long would it take for the developers to fix it? Is it urgent? Is it not urgent? Do they fix? So when we say defect is urgent, and we've given it severity 1, do they fix it within 1 day or within 10 days? All that has to be agreed before we start testing. So all that is in it. That's why it's called the test plan. Do we do stand-ups every day? Do we do defect management, defect triage meeting? What's the defect triage meeting? When you raise defects, everybody involved in the project would organize a weekly meeting, a daily meeting to discuss the status of the defects. You as a test analyst will be present there. You will come with your spreadsheet, with your slide. These are the defects you raised. And in most cases, the test analyst or the test lead will be the one to chair the occasion. As in, you would say, oh, defect number 1, I cannot log in. Can I know the status of that? The developer might say, oh no, I don't understand. And you explain to him, oh, when I put my username and I put my password and I click login, I can't log in. Oh, and he will say, oh, is this, is that, is that, is that. Oh, I'll have a look at it. Oh, I fixed it. You know, he can say I fixed it. It means that's part of your retest. You have to test it again. So you have to be able to put in there how long your defect triage, I'll talk about defect triage as well later. How long are your defect triage meetings? How often, sorry. Is it a weekly meeting you organize? Is it an everyday meeting? Or is it once in a week meeting? And when you talk about the defect triage meeting, what do you want to be discussing in the defect triage meeting? Do you want to be discussing the defects solely, or new functionalities, or what? Or do you want to be telling the developers off that they didn't fix the defect on time? Of course you don't do that. But if you've agreed everything in your test plan, everything has been agreed in your test plan, then you are able to say yes. For defect severity 1 that I've raised, it should take 2 days. They should have fixed it now. So now, if they haven't fixed a defect that says fix within 2 days, you as a test analyst wants to know why. And you know why? Because you'll be reporting on this. You'll be reporting on the delay. Because if they don't fix a defect on time, and it's a defect severity 1, you can't go live with that. You can't stop testing. So if they're not fixing it within the stipulated time, you put down 2 days, and they haven't done it within 2 days, you have to start raising that. Raise that as a risk. And of course, escalate to the project manager. And that's why communication is vital. Also, within your test plan, you detail everything you want to do. Who is doing what, roles and responsibilities. So that by the time you want to raise your defect, maybe you have a third-party company who fixes your defects, or maybe you have your developer in-house. You would say, or it depends on the application. Some people, the same application, they have an aspect of the application whereby they consult the third-party people. They are outside the company, and they have an application whereby they have a functionality whereby the developers will fix. Everything needs to be stated within the test plan. The scope of testing, what you are testing, what's in scope of testing? What's outside the scope of testing? You are not testing this application, you are not testing that application, we are testing this application. And even if we are testing this application, we are only testing this functionality in this application. We are not testing everything within this application. So all that will be documented in the test plan. And that's different from a test strategy. The test strategy is just an overall organizational, I wouldn't call it SLA, but it's similar to SLA. Say, for example, if we have upgrade projects, for example, these are the type of testing we do for upgrade projects. If we have business as usual, BAU, these are the type of testing that we do for BAU. So the test strategy is just an organizational plan, organizational testing plan. It will document the type of testing that an organization does, depending on the type of project. But your test plan is specific to your project and how you want to go about testing. Who's responsible? Yes. Who is responsible for what? Now, within your test plan, you talk about what data you've prepared. Who is entering those data? You talk about the testing you want to do, the type of testing. So next week we'll be talking about different types of testing. And as an assignment, please go and study the various types of testing we have. So from next week, I'll be talking about the SDLC, which is the software development lifecycle, and how that integrates with the software testing lifecycle I taught earlier. Because at every phase of development, there's a phase of testing within that. So I'll be talking about the SDLC and the STLC, which is the software testing lifecycle. So I'll be talking about the software development lifecycle and the software testing lifecycle next week. And I'll also be talking in detail about the bit I missed out earlier. I'll try and remember. So if we have any questions, can we, I noticed a couple of people have typed in on the keypads, and I want to start answering those questions. I prefer to follow the keypads because I don't want it to get rowdy. So next week also, sorry, I was going to say, next week also we'll be talking about the various types of testing that we have. So I'll be talking more about, yes, we would be given, yes, we would be given a project. Someone has just asked a question, will we be given a project to go home with? And my answer to that is yes. And I'll be answering the question shortly. But next week, I'll be talking about the SDLC, Software Development Lifecycle, Software Testing Lifecycle, and I would also be talking about the various types of testing next week. And then hopefully, based on the assignment that I've given, and can I ask quickly, is everyone on the group, on the manual testing group, is everyone on this group? I mean, in this lesson, you on that group, because I'm going to put the assignment on that group. Not on it is, I think it's obligate. Well, it's not compulsory, but if you want to do testing, if you want to understand it, I'm going to put some assignments on there for everyone to do, and I'll tell you exactly where to submit the assignments so that I know that you understand. So I'm ready to take questions now. Sorry, I'm looking at the keypad, so I'm just going to see if I can scroll up and I'll answer the questions one by one. There seems to be a lot of questions, but I'll start from the beginning. So I'm reading the first one. Is there only one test management tool? Is there only one test management tool, which is the Azure DevOps? No. There are various test management tools. We have Jira. So many of them now are off the shelf. We have Jira, we have Bugzilla, we have HPALM, we have TestLink, we have TestRail. All those ones I'm mentioning, I've used them before. We have TFS, which is the Microsoft one. Now it's Azure DevOps. Now, these days, why we want to do Azure DevOps is because most organizations now use Azure DevOps. It's the popular one now. It's the most common one now. It's general understanding. If you understand how a test management tool works, you will understand every other test management tool. But it's good for you to have Azure DevOps on your CV, to be honest, than for you to have Jira or QC. Most organizations, they use Jira, they use QC, but the one that is reigning now, that is in vogue now, is the Azure DevOps. And Azure DevOps is more or less like a Microsoft Test Manager, yes, TFS. So it's best that's why we want to do. That's why we wanted to do. We decided to do the Azure DevOps instead of doing the other ones that are not popular. Now the next question here is no, there are more than. Oh, somebody has answered. Okay, how can we get the tools? Sorry, are you talking about? So if you're talking about the tool, which is the Azure DevOps, you can download online. There's a free Azure DevOps application that you can download, but I think it will just give you limited. Well, you can download one online. I think there's a free one, but it might just give you some limited time to use it or something like that. Or also, there is what's it called? You can use the YouTube to give you a tutorial about the Azure DevOps. Are we going to be looking at the Agile methodology? Yes, we are going to be talking about various methodologies, and my methodologies will start next week when I'm talking about the software development lifecycle and the software testing lifecycle. We'll look at the waterfall model, and then we'll look at the waterfall methodology, and we'll look at the Agile methodology. But most companies are going Agile now. Most companies are going Agile. I've done a waterfall project before whereby the testing comes at the very end, but the Agile you develop in iterations. You develop functionality by functionality, and then you test. You develop and test. Develop a unit, test. Develop a functionality, test. But of course, we'll talk about that next week. So the next question is,
Please, can you give the full meaning of your abbreviations? BA, Business Analyst, SQL. SQL is in Structured SQL Language, is it? Query Language. And then UAT, User Acceptance Testing. SQL, you just say is SQL anyway. SQL is SQL, is the way of querying the database. I'm not sure. Oh, structural, actually, I said structured. Structural query language, okay. Actually, I don't know whether I'll be able to take this SQL, but I would say there's a good website where you can learn the SQL. You can learn SQL from tutorials points. It's just a way of querying the database. It depends on what you are doing. In my years of testing, I hardly use SQL, but it's good for you to understand it, just in case you stumble against SQL. Then please add there 2 slices because mine is showing 2 pages. Sorry, Adetayo, I don't understand that question. What is the difference between a test case? Oh, people are still typing in. Okay, sorry, I just got removed from that screen. What's the difference between a test case and a test? I'm trying to look for that question again. What is the difference between a test case and the test scripts? They are the same, I would say to Abisola. Yeah, they are the same. Test case is the same thing with test scripts. So when they say start scripting, it means start writing your test script. And when they say, there's another question that says, what's the difference between test cases and test steps? They are the same thing. Your test cases are the instructions. Your test steps are the instructions as well on how to do your testing. So they are the same thing. They use them interwoven. You can use the test scripts. You can say test script, test cases. They are all the same. Test steps, it will tell you what step 1, log on, step 2. They are the same thing. What is the difference between a test condition and a test script? So your test condition is different. Your test condition might be talking about the state of your system before you even start testing. Now your test script is what you are documenting, like I said earlier. Your test script is your test cases, instructions on how to test. So they are used interchangeably, all these terms. By the time you start testing, you know that test scripts and test scripts and test cases are the same, and test suite, yeah, they are the same. It's just a folder where you keep your test cases. Would you send the developer a print screen of the defect? No, you don't normally send it to the developer, you document it. So when you are testing, you actually have your defect, a part of your defect management process would be maybe your test management tool. You give the developer the access to that. So when you run your test and it passed, you put a screenshot. I tend to put my screenshot when it fails anyway. I put my screenshot in the thing when it fails, but I keep my screenshots to myself, like on an Excel spreadsheet, when it passes, just in case they ask for it. But when it fails, you don't send it to your developer. You actually keep it on the screen. Some test management tools can take a screenshot when you're actually testing. I'm not sure whether Azure DevOps can do that. I think I would have to investigate that. But you don't send it to your developer. You keep it on the test management tool, and the developer would have access to it, so he can view it if it needs to see it. Okay, I'm scrolling through. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through the questions, and in a nutshell, test case and test steps. I hope I haven't missed any. A question: when doing testing, there are so many different terminologies. How can you tell which one means the same thing? And Cynthia asked this question: how can you tell which one means the same thing? By the time so after a while, if you get conversant with these things, there are some tests that you would not. There are some things that you read online. So I'll prescribe a website for you, to be honest, because there are so many things online and you don't want to get confused. Guru 99 is the best for learners, for manual testers. Guru 99, and I've always said that if you want to learn, that's how I learned. And there are so many terminologies, yes, and there are so many different types of testing, yes, that in your lifetime I don't even think you'll be able to do all the testing. I'm telling you, there are about 200 and something testing. I've been testing for a while now. I haven't done more than 7 different types of testing, if I have. You understand? So yeah. Question: is there a way we can upload? You can upload the document so we can see and show it from how we can pick up a. Oh, sorry, I was reading that. Sorry, just because people are typing and I'm reading, so each time they type, it goes back down. So my next question I was reading. Oh, I think I've missed that. Test cases are not really the same as test steps. Okay. Test steps are the action carried out for the test case. God, step 1, step 2. Okay. Step 1, log on. Okay. Step 1 is the step. Step 1, log on. Step 2. Yeah, okay. Anyway. As our tester, you might be involved in producing the test. Yeah, you might be. I didn't say you won't be. You might be involved, yeah. But in most cases, you might not. For example, step 1, okay. And then validate the test case. SLA, yeah. Are we going to be given some homework? Yes, I said yes to that. Please, what's DevOps? Yeah, that's the DevOps is the test management tool. When would we go through DevOps? Please, I think that would be. So once I give this assignment, and this answer goes to Daya. So once I give this assignment and you write your test cases, actually I want to start from the requirements. I want you to be able to extract your test scenarios from a requirement. Then you now write your test cases. Then we'll be able to put those test cases on Azure and we run the test. So it's like the process, end-to-end process. That's what I want to do. That's the intention. So when are we going to go through DevOps? That might be the week after the next, I hope. Then can you give us a requirement to write and identify? Yeah, that's the intention. Can you give us a requirement to write and identify test cases? So I want to give a requirement and I want to say write your test scenarios, and from your test scenarios you'll be able to write your test cases. At the same time, I want it to be a project that you can find on the internet so that you'll be able to write those test cases as it is, not imagining them. So yes to that. And I can write that down. That's the intention. Okay. Please, will this lecture be recorded? Oh, I thought we were recording. Okay, for those who don't know, Guru 99 is a good. Okay, yeah. Someone said that Guru 99 is a good website. Where do you document your defects? So you document your defects in the test management tool. And remember, I spoke about test traceability matrix. I think I will get next week. I'll be showing you an Excel test traceability matrix. I need to write that down so that I won't forget. Next week I'll be showing you that so you can see what I'm saying. You can do it on an Excel spreadsheet, and I will demo that next week. And then we can do it in Azure DevOps, I think. So when we get to the Azure, I can show you that as well. So I just need to write this down. Test traceability matrix template or something that I've done in the past. Okay. Right. I think I'm almost done. It's your defect. Okay. Azure DevOps software shall say the defect management tool is a defect test management tool. A test management tool. Sorry. Is a defect management? Yes, it is a test management tool. So defect management tool and a test management tool, they are two different things. Your defect management tool is a tool whereby you manage your defects, and your test management tool is where you manage your tests. Now we have some tools that can do both. So for example, the Azure DevOps can manage your tests. It means it keeps your test cases on there, you run your test cases, and I think you can keep your defect on there as well. So it's not the same thing, but yes. A test management tool can as well be a defect management tool. Some people use two different tools, whereby you keep your test cases and run them in one, and then you link it to another one, which is your defect management tool. Okay, I've answered this question before. How can we get the Azure DevOps? And thank you, Adi, for posting the link. And also, Adi posted guru99.com. You can read all about manual testing there. Please, the link for joining Telegraph. Yes, we would actually send that link to you shortly. HPALM, yes, is a test management tool. Yes, it is. It's not a management tool, it's a test management tool. So when you are doing your testing, remember you are actually physically looking at the test. You are carrying out the steps. Step 1, log on. But on the test management tool, there's a button that says run. It's just for you to document. So the test management tool is just for you to document that you have actually run that test. But you are physically running, doing the activity, your step 1, step 2, your test cases, you are physically running it on your test environment that you have been given. I just don't want you to confuse that. So the test management tool is not to run the test, but of course it says run, you do the run button. It's just for you to keep a track of what test cases you have run, what failed, and what passed. Meanwhile, the physical action of testing is done on your machine or on the test environment, wherever it may be. Any other question? I'm so sorry, I would have explained the SDLC, but I don't have the slide, and that's why I'm not doing that this evening. Does anyone have any other question? So on a daily basis, as a test analyst, yeah, you come to work depending on where they are at the phase of testing that they are. You can come to an organization, they won't just bombard you with a lot of documents. Well, of course, they will bombard you with a lot of documents to read, but they won't just say start testing, because you have to understand, first of all, the requirements. So they'll give you a lot of documentations to read. When you first get to an organization, you don't just jump into testing. You have to know what they do. You have to know what test tool that they use. You have to familiarize with the test yourself with the test tool. You have to know what they use. You have to familiarize yourself with the application on the test. So they won't just dump everything on you to say start testing. No, they'll give you a document to read. Yours as a test analyst is to read that document, even if it means you go to bed at night and put it on your head. Well, you have to read it and understand it so that you'll be able to have conversations. And most cases, what I say to people, when I first started testing, when they are having a conversation in a meeting, when I don't understand, I don't say anything. But some people want to show that they know the first time they start working, they start saying things. When you start saying things that you don't understand, these people out there would know that you don't know, because you are not saying what you should be saying. So it's best you keep quiet and you listen. And when you keep quiet and you listen, you'll tend to learn a lot. And of course, you go home and you read the documents. So what do I do? There's another question here. What do you do if you don't have a requirement? Because not all organizations provide a requirement document. How do you identify the scenarios and the test cases? I mentioned when I was teaching earlier that, and that's true, some organizations don't have a requirement document for you to go by. What you do in this case is you do an exploratory testing. Thank you, Victor. And you also look at the test environment. So you are exploring the test environment. They would give you, so even if they don't give you a test environment, I have written my test cases from slides before, from screenshots of an application. So from this application, you look at the next application. I've written my test cases from slides before. So, but the slide, of course, is like a test environment itself. It's like the screen you see in front of you. So say, for example, you have your Word document. How are you going to test a Word document without a requirement? You know that when you click on the file, so all you just do is sit down there, click on file. When you click on file, how many options are there? When you select all the options on that file tab, what does it take you to? Does file take you find, for example, does it take you to find? Does it display options? So all you just say is click on file displays options. Click on this, everything you can explore. Just explore the test environment, explore the application. You'll be able to come up with it. If we don't have any questions, I'll call it a day, except we have any other question. Is the test environment a house, a room, or a computer workstation? Well, in most cases, it doesn't matter. The test environment, so I think it depends on what you are testing. And I know I laughed on that, but that's a very good question. So if you're testing on a desktop application, your test environment might be on your local machine, might be on your laptop, or might be on your desktop at work. But if it's a room, yes. When I worked as a test analyst within an EPOS company. So when I say EPOS, retail. So if you test within a retail organizations, they will have the till, they will have the printer, they will have the barcode, they will have the back office, they will have all sorts, back office machine, they will have the kitchen screen. All that you cannot have on your machine, so it will be in a room. So it means you will do some transactions on the till. You will see whether it prints. For example, you will see whether it prints everything you've done, your transaction, maybe for £100. When you print your receipts, you will see whether, oh, everything is on that receipt. So in that type of environment, you cannot have your test case on your machine. You have your printer within the room. You can't have all that on the machine. So yes, it's usually a room whereby you have your printer, you have your barcode scanner, you have your desktop application, you have your back office where you do your start of day, you put money in the till, you have a drawer and stuff like that. So what does the requirement document look like? Okay, if Ola wants a requirement document, I will send one as well. So I have to make a note of what I said I will be sending, please, so that I don't forget. So I said I'm sending a requirement, right? And I'll send one to the group. And that's the requirement. You have a look at what the requirement looks like, because from that requirement, you are going to be extracting your test scenarios. And from the test scenarios, you are going to be writing your test cases. And I'll do this maybe over the weekend. Please just bear with me. Is the test strategy test approach? No, Kay, it's not the same thing. So your test strategy, like I said, is more or less like a test principles that governs an organization. Test approach is more or less the same thing as a test plan. So the term is used, people use it interwovenly, depending on where you're working. Yeah, so you can use that, you can say yes, test approach. I've written a test approach before and it's a test plan, but the strategy is more company level. Okay, Titi Lope, how do we document test scenarios? If you were in this class, I think I spoke a lot about test scenarios. Test scenarios are what you can test within your requirements. So your requirement documents are basically what a system, what the functional, your requirement document will detail the functionality of your application, what the application must have or could have. So it means how the application functions. And so your test scenarios are from that. What are you testing? Your testables. What do you want to test? From all the requirements that have been listed down, what can you test there? Test policy is more or less the same thing as strategy. Yes, Kay. Okay, if there's no other question, I think I'll call it a day. Thank you very much, everyone.